So please don't be shy if my voice drops and you can't hear. Just wave. The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. So the title of this talk comes from a quote from a famous yogi, Yogi Berra. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. And I took it. Here it is. And so before the fork in the road, and before the bumps in the road, and the trajectory of the road, up or down, wide or narrow, is given the road. It's given the path. And just to remind us of our connection to each other and to others who are not here, throughout space and throughout time, I'd like to invite all of us to participate in a little mindfulness practice during this talk. So I'm going to hold this rattle and let what arises arise, and invite into my heart, and invite into the heart of this space someone who is dear to me, who is suffering, or who has died, or who could not be here, who I would like to consciously bring in. And when I do that, I'm going to shake this rattle. And so I'll begin with you, and the rattle will make its way around the room. Hold the rattle, and when you're ready, give it a shake. And if the rattle doesn't come to you, that's okay. And if the rattle comes to you twice, that's okay too. And the rattle will be interrupting what I'm saying. The bringing in of the suffering of each one of us interrupts the flow of the way we think life needs to go. And so notice the sound of the rattle, and please notice your reaction to it, because different things will be happening at different times when you hear the rattle. Okay? So, thank you. Once upon a time, a long time ago, before the Buddha, there was a great king who was a powerful deity And the name of the king was Indra. And Indra wanted to create a gift for the universe. So the king called his chief architect to him and said, I need you to create something really wonderful. And so the architect thought about it and figured it out and planned it and created for the king this net of Indra. Many of you know this. And so the Buddhists have taken on, the Mahayana tradition since the 3rd century has taken on this image of the net of Indra as a central symbol of certain aspects of the practice, interbeing and non-self particularly. So the net is vast and boundless. And it covers all space and all time, past, present, and future. And everywhere the interwoven energetic strands of the net intersect, there's a jewel. And the jewel has an infinite number of facets. And each facet reflects every other jewel in the net. There's also the space in the net. And we'll come back to this. But each thought, word, and deed is a node in the net of Indra. And so it's constantly growing and expanding, and changing. Everything that happens affects everything else that happens. Not only throughout space, but throughout time. So that's the net of Indra. When I took my vows as a chaplain, there are 3 tenets in the Zen Peacemaker order that we're asked to follow. And these are not knowing, bearing witness, and compassionate action. And so the first one is about not knowing in any situation. So I look out, I know many of you. So I think, I know this about you, and I know that about you, and I know how you were yesterday, and I know some of your history, and I think I know you. And the knowing is an impediment to how you are in this moment. How we can connect in this moment. So I need to let go of what I know in order to be present. Because what I know is in the past. And the knowing actually imprisons us in a way. We're very proud of what we know. And we always want to learn more, and that's good. And we always need to be able to step out of that knowing and into a state of not knowing. It takes trust to do that. Because then we're open to whatever may arise. Whatever shake of that rattle arises in that moment, we're open to it. Knowing is, oh, that's just the sound of the rattle. Not knowing is much bigger, much softer. A few days before my mother died 10 years ago, I asked her, I said, what do you think happens when we die. And lying there in her bed, really unable to move, she got this smile on her face, and she said, "I don't know, but I'm looking forward to finding out." If she knew, or thought she knew, she would be closed to her experience in a certain way. And not knowing, she was vastly open. I've always held that in my heart. Last night I had a dream, and my father appeared. My father, who died over 50 years ago, appeared in the dream. And he was on a ski trip with us, with myself and friends, my grandson, my daughter, which were going on in 2 weeks. And he was there. And in holding, this dream, my father, when I was a boy, taught me to ski. And then he died. And he's on the trip. My grandson and my daughter, who never knew my father, are skiing with him on that trip. He is with us on that ski trip. Maybe I need to contact the lodge and have an extra bed put out. I know he's not there. And the knowing blocks my awareness of how he is there. I know a person who died 50 years ago can't be skiing next to me. I know that. And that blocks that from happening. And so this knowing builds these mazes in our minds and in our perceptions. And when for a moment we can drop that and step into not knowing, everything is possible. The net of Indra begins to appear and to become visible and tangible. And every node connects to every other node. So sometimes it seems to me that walking on this path and walking in this lifetime, it's very much like a tightrope. And on this side I have joy, and on this side I have sorrow. And on this side I have gain, and on this side I have loss. And on this side I have equanimity, and on this side I have suffering. Step by step, breath by breath, always trying to maintain balance and not always able to do it. And one thing I really want to make clear about uncertainty is that this tightrope is in the dark and we're blind and we're lost. If we knew where we were going and we knew exactly how to get there and we knew exactly who we are and where we've been, we would be asleep. Because we'd know everything. We'd be totally shut. And so we're lost in the dark. And one of the first things that becomes clear, usually by touch, is that we're not alone. The rattle sounds. There's someone else there. We're not alone. We may all be lost. And we may all be confused or not knowing. But we're not alone. That much is clear. And not only that, but the tightrope is a strand in the net of Indra. And we only think we can fall off. And when we fall off, we're caught by the net, like a tightrope walker. The net is beneath us. The net is under our feet all the time. The net is all around us. You can sense it. You can feel it when you do Qigong. You can feel it when you're doing meditation. You can feel it in this room with your friends on the path, lost together. This is the net. This is it. There's nowhere to go. We're here. It seems like an article of faith that if I stumble and fall, I'll be caught. And for some of us, that may be. It can become an article of confidence. Because in meditation practice, we can fall again and again and again into the net of our own mindfulness and come back. We can experience the support and containment of the net of Indra every moment in our practice. It's right there. Maybe it came through the Dharma thousands of years ago, but it needs to be realized in this moment by each one of us. And so the question arises, what use is a teaching like this? So if I'm on my deathbed and my body is in dissolution, being ravaged by cancer or something, and my mind is in dissolution, where is my refuge? Can I step into the net, awareness of the net of Indra, in that situation where I need it? Can I do that? Is this teaching solid? Can I rely on this? Because I've read about it and because I've experienced it in meditation. Will it really be there for me when I need it, not just when I'm sitting in a Dharma hall with the beautiful sun coming in? Will it really be there? Is it solid? No, it's not. All of these teachings are smoke in the wind. All of these teachings are brittle. And they collapse. When we need them the most, they dissolve. And we're left with not knowing. And with the next in-breath, the teaching arises anew. That's how we carry this on. The net of Indra is always here for us. If you look at the trees on the grounds, the beautiful, the forests, and you're aware maybe that trees struggle for light. They compete with each other. They produce thousands of seeds, and the seeds are all trying to grow, and only 1 out of 1,000 is really going to make it. And the roots are trying to get into the soil and competing with the other. And there's this, nature going on. And it's easy to get lost in that. Each one of us as an individual with our own struggles. And what about the force that's in that acorn that creates that tree, that produces that tree? Maybe there's a lot of struggle. Maybe the tree will get very old and very big, and maybe it'll die as a sapling. There's all the struggle of the life of the tree, but the force that creates that tree, that's the net of Indra. The trees are just nodes on the net. And so no matter what happens to the tree, it's a manifestation of that force of nature, of life. It's that close. It's that close to us. And what Jan said, last night, quoting one of the teachers, the Dharma, it's really great. And the teachers, they're really great. I look to my practice. Because it's in each one of our practice that it comes alive. That it really comes alive. And every time something collapses, a structure collapses, at the next in-breath, there's a chance for the new one to come up. And it's that constant change that actually becomes dependable. I know that many of us have experienced this moment to moment in this retreat because I've heard the stories. I've had this impediment in my practice, and I found a way to move through it. And there's this ease and joy and peace in my practice now. Wonderful. Let it go. Because it's the next one arising. And Jan alluded last night too to the flickering nature of reality. The pixelated nature of what we think is solid. So in meditation, one thing we're taught is to pay attention to the thoughts that arise in the space of the mind. The objects of mind that arise. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, so on. And work with those. And that's good teaching. Are we thinking all the time? Is there space between this thought and the next thought? And the next thought? And as we slow down and inhabit the body and come into the present moment, the space expands. Those are the spaces in the net. In the time of the Buddha, it was written, when the fisherman draws the net, he also draws the spaces in the net. There's no net without space, without the spaces. They arise together. And so we can focus on our thoughts. Those are the nodes. And the space in which that arises is the space of the net between the nodes. And that's who we are too. That spaciousness in which everything arises moment to moment to moment. That's who we are too. When I was a boy and I lived in Japan, there were these wonderful lizards that would scuttle around. Maybe they exist in the U.S. too, I think in the South. They're called blue tails. Maybe you know of these lizards. They're quite beautiful. Their tails are this iridescent blue, and they're maybe about this big. And of course, as a child, we would try to catch these lizards. And you could be really quick and maybe get one, but you'd always get it by the tail, and the tail would come off. And you'd be left holding this wiggling blue thing. And the lizard was gone. As soon as we grab onto that which arises, it's gone. And we're left with the tail. And that's why I say the teachings are brittle. That's why I say you can't depend on them. Don't believe what I'm saying to you. Don't believe the teachings. Trust your experience. Trust your own experience. You can use the Dharma, you can use the teachings to try things out. Say, well, they said that, I read this, Thich Nhat Hanh said that, let's see if that's really true. It's very useful for pointing us in a direction. But it's only our personal experience in the present moment that's real and true for us. And then it's that shared experience of stepping into not knowing. Because I may reach some stage in my own practice where I can be open, but I don't have a clue where you are. It's a total mystery. And so then this not knowing multiplies by everyone. And we find ourselves in this vast net. We've heard the rattle sound a lot of times already. So I just want to pause for a moment to let the words settle down and just bring into our hearts this passing rattle and what that means. You know, there's a story that goes like, how did you sleep last night? Well, I didn't sleep well. Oh, really? Why? Well, there was all this noise outside. I think it was a bear at the bird feeder. And the dog was just barking and barking and barking in the house. Kept me up all night. I didn't sleep well. And having lived in the country for many years, I haven't had a bear yet, but the raccoons just love to come and attack the bird feeders. We'd have to take them in. And the dog would keep you up. One way to look at our practice is we'd like to silence the barking dog for a moment so we can get a sense of the bear. What is the bear that's outside the door? As long as the dog is keeping us up, we are never going to know. We know it's there, and our imagination runs wild, as David talked about. We're going to fill in the blanks of what that is out there. There's an old Zen story about a person who's locked in a dark room. And when they went in the room, they were told that there's a snake in the room. And they're sitting in the room with this awareness. And just for a moment, the light goes on, and they see in the corner a coiled rope. That's all. And the whole time they're sitting there thinking it was a snake. It was a coiled rope. What is the bear for you? When we get quiet enough and the dog calms down and goes to sleep, we can hear the sound. And maybe we can get a glimpse of what it is. And maybe we can touch it. And maybe we can even open the door and go out onto the deck with it. There's a little tiny poem told by a teacher of mine, Joan Halifax. On this snowy night, my black dog is my lantern. On this snowy night, my black dog is my lantern. What is your black dog? Is it that rattle is going to go again? Is it death? Is it fear? Is it not knowing? Is it confusion? Is it addiction? What is it for you in this moment? And in mindfulness we're instructed, and in insight meditation, these are wonderful practices. And we're instructed to gently hold whatever it is that arises in the mind, being rooted and grounded in the breath and the body. What is it that arises in the mind? And be with it and look at it. And on retreat, once in the middle of a long retreat, I got really, really fed up with doing that. Because we were sitting 15 hours a day, and I just had enough of doing it. And I just said, what would happen if I just accepted everything that arose with love, no matter what it is? And I tried that. Stray thought, pain in the shoulder, a little memory, image of my dog. And what happened was people who I love began appearing for me in that open space. And we can create that open space right here. That's what we're doing. So that when we hear that rattle sound, that there is suffering in the world, there's a space of love in which that can arise in awareness. And it's difficult suffering. And we can look at it and we can try to help. We can do what we can. We can work with it. Those are all very important. And ultimately and finally, this too. This too. Reality seems steady and constant. Yet, the Dharma teaches us that it actually arises moment to moment to moment in our awareness. It's actually not something out there that's going on. We are essential elements in this moment to moment arising of all that is. And as our awareness can expand, we can embrace the next shaking of that rattle, whether it's ours or someone else's. So one question when we go on retreat is, how much do we want to pay attention to the news? Right? There's a big world going on this whole time, and lots of stuff is happening. The New York Times is full of it. Do we want to bring that into our awareness, or do we want to stay in the container of this practice, in this Sangha? And it's an open question. It's a good question. And what's the news? I woke up in the middle of the night last night, and I had this. What if this was the Neolithic, and there was a newspaper, and I was reading it? So, Gorg hits Blag with rock again. Malika, great-grandmother, dies at the ancient age of 42. The obituary section. Announcements. Waggy and Floggy have become engaged. They're registered at Pelt, Pot, and Beyond. There's a birth. There's a stillbirth. Another tribe has raided and stolen the horses from this tribe. There was an earthquake. It's the same stuff. It's the same news, really. I mean, the details change. And the volume changes. We're in touch with news from all over the world. We're supposed to care about everything that happens all over the world all the time. Forget it. We're not wired for that. We can't do it. We burn out instantly. But the news in essence remains the same. And the Buddha described the news as greed, hate, and delusion. And that all suffering arises from these, and it takes many different forms. We need to pay attention to the suffering in the world. It's here, we're part of it, it's important, we need to be engaged with it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. But in a sense, it's the same news again and again and again. It's the rattle, isn't it? It's the black dog in all of the disguises. It's the bear at the bird feeder in all of its manifestations. And the early teachings are about finding your way out of this cycle of suffering. And the Mahayana teachings are about finding your way into the suffering. Finding ways to be with the suffering. So there's a wonderful Zen story that really rings true for me often. I think of it. And it goes like this. So there's this guy, right? And he dies. And he goes into the afterlife and looks around, and it's beautiful. There's mountains and streams and forests, and there's a path, and he walks along the path. And he comes to a clearing that seems familiar. And he looks, and there's a cottage. It's sort of the storybook house of his dreams. It's perfect. Opens the door and goes in. It's furnished just the way he likes it. Goes into the kitchen, opens the fridge. It's all of his favorite food. And he lives there, enjoys the sunrise, the sunset. Everything that he ever wanted is here. And one day there's a knock on the door, and he opens it, and the woman of his dreams is there. She comes in, and they live together, and this just goes on. And after a while, there's this restlessness that begins to arise. Doesn't know why, but it's just this kind of unease, even though everything's perfect. And it grows, and it grows, and it grows. And eventually he can't stand it anymore. And he says, I'm going to go talk to the landlord. So he says, I'll be back later, leaves, goes down, finds the one in charge, knocks on the door, goes in, and she looks up and says, I've been expecting you. What can I do for you? And he says, look, I don't mean to be ungrateful here. I mean, heaven is really great, but I'd like to try hell for a while. And she says to him, where do you think you are? We try and try and try to create a perfect life for ourselves. And I don't blame any of us for doing it. I spent decades doing it. There's nothing wrong with it intrinsically. But after a while, it's not enough. Because it's reinforcing the separate self. It's all about me and my stuff and what I want and how I want it to be. And it's a total prison. It's totally knowing. It's surrounding ourselves with a reality that we've created that is a prison. And so it's only by opening to not knowing that we can step out of that prison. And that involves 100 shakes of the rattle all around us. That involves every article in the New York Times. Opening to that. So that we can step out of our little man-made, woman-made prison that may be gilded with gold, but that's keeping us separate from all that arises moment to moment to moment. And so, in some ways, the Bodhisattva path is about being on the edge. Being on the edge all the time. And we know teenagers, they want to be on the edge. And so they smash up their motorcycles, and they drink to excess, and they take drugs, and they seek thrill. Or if they're living in a ghetto, they join the gang. Because, man, that's exciting. That's really where the excitement is, where the action is. It's on the edge. And so, in a way, spiritual maturity is discerning ways that we can be on the edge that are not destructive. Ways that we can be on the edge that can be useful and helpful. And this is why when David said to me, would you be interested in going into this maximum security prison with me and with Jan and with Walt and others, would you be willing to do that? if you do that, it means that somebody might get out of segregation for an hour. That was my edge. No, I don't want to do that. I want to stay as far away from that prison as I can be. And out of my friendship and out of my vows, I said, okay, let's go. Let's do it. And it's an edge. It's definitely an edge to be there. Same with hospice. Why would you go to hospice? Or, whoa, you're so great, you go to hospice. No. It's just being alive. Being in a situation where I don't know what's going to happen moment to moment. Being there with non-self. So the second tenet of the peacemaker order is bearing witness. So not knowing, and we walk in, say, or we sit down, or we go home. You don't know, right? Not knowing. That's the first one. Bearing witness is the second one. So that's paying attention. So not knowing is this blank slate. Bearing witness is the focus. Paying attention. Noticing what's going on. And the third one is then compassionate action. The action will arise out of the not knowing and the bearing witness. And so if you're a psychotherapist and the door opens and your next client comes in, you probably know. You go into not knowing. They sit down. You listen. You're bearing witness. Well, what am I going to do for this person? What am I going to say? That's compassionate action. And we do that again and again and again. For me, if I'm counseling someone or if I'm giving a talk, something will arise that I know I can say this. Because I know this. And if I wait another half beat, something that I don't know is going to arise. And I'll say that. So not knowing, bearing witness, compassionate action. If we try to shortcut it and go into a situation knowing how to teach these guys mindfulness meditation. I know how to teach mindfulness meditation, and I'm going to teach it to you. It's not going to work. We have to not know, pay attention, and then the action that's needed will arise. Jan was with me just Thursday, and when we do one-on-one visits with inmates, it's in these small rooms that are off of the large room like this, which is the visiting area. And near the middle there's a guard station, and there are chairs around, and then the inmate will come in and the visitors will come in and they'll sit and talk, and the guards will watch. And there's a guard at the door, and there's another guard in the hall. And over here, there's a display case with items for sale that the inmates have made. I mean, these are serious felons, and they do unbelievable crochet. I'll tell you what, I mean, there are this little, like, hoodie for a size 2. Blankets, paintings, jewelry. And right in the middle was this unbelievable pencil drawing of, it was a diptych. It was two parts. And one was an adult hand tossing a baseball. And the other was a child's hand in a mitt like this, about to catch it. It was called Big League Dreams. As soon as I saw it, I knew I had to buy it. Because I was a baseball player, and I taught my grandson. And he's an excellent baseball player, and don't get me started. And this was just went to my heart right away. And it was by far the most expensive thing there, $60. Now, when we were led in by the COs, the correctional officers, the guards, the man who brought us in was extremely gruff. He was an older gentleman, obviously been on the job a long time, and really didn't have time for these do-gooders coming into his institution and making trouble. And in a lot of ways, that's how volunteers are viewed. People in the prison need to protect themselves, and they need to protect the safety of the public, and that's their job. And anything that threatens that is just really trouble. And so we're trouble coming in. They have to escort us to places. They have to watch us. They have to be sure we're not taken in by these, really manipulative inmates, and so on and so on. And you could see it all. He was very gruff toward us. Took us in. And same thing with the guard at the station. Oh, what do you want? Yeah. Well, when I came back and I said to the CO at the station, I said, I'd like to buy that pencil drawing there. He put down his pen and looked up at me. He said, yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? And it is amazing. It's just gorgeously, it looks like it came out of a gallery or a museum. Beautifully done. He said, it's amazing, isn't it? He said, the guy who did that, when he came in, he couldn't even draw a stick figure. And now look what he can do. And I just think that's amazing, that picture. And I do a little art myself, he said. And the other guard came up and he said, he wants to buy this. He said, oh yeah, this is... Suddenly, the whole atmosphere changed. And they were proud of this inmate who had done this. They were taking joy in his accomplishment and the fact that it was being bought by somebody. And actually, in a way, sort of owning some credit that they had helped this person to develop into this amazing artist. Who knew? Not knowing. I had no idea that would happen when I just was moved to buy this. And these are tough guys, And there was this opening that just spontaneously happened out of this not knowing mind. I'm just moved to do this. And here it was. And there's this connection that takes place. Turns out the COs who were the black dogs or the bears turned out to, just in that moment, be very open-hearted and kind people. Not so scary with their blue uniforms and their belts and their radios and all of that. Really not so scary when approached in that way. I want to do a time check here. Okay. I have 5 minutes left, so then you'll be free. I want to say a couple more things about uncertainty. Some of you may know that the Green Bay Packers have a game. a playoff game. It starts at noon or so. Why is that interesting? Because we don't know the outcome. If I wanted to watch Green Bay Packers games, I'm sure I could find tapes of every game they've ever played and I could watch them all whenever I want. But who cares? It's over, right? What's interesting is the uncertainty. And so there's two sides of it, isn't there? There's the oh my God part, and then there's the adventure. You know? We don't know what's going to happen. Let's pay attention. If we knew the outcome, we wouldn't have to pay attention. Wouldn't matter. And so, in a way, it's the uncertainty, the not knowing, that wakes us up. Without that, we can just go to sleep. We can create this little heaven and we can just stay in it and miss out on life, on the edge where we want to be. The mantra that came to me when I was describing that experience on retreat, just loving whatever arises in my mind in that moment. The body arrives in love. The breath arrives in love. The mind arrives in love. Moment to moment to moment. Everything arises moment to moment. And when we let go of all of our certainty, we can be in that moment to moment arising. I would say the opposite of uncertainty is not certainty. It's confidence. Confidence is soft and big. Certainty is narrow and brittle. Confidence can hold us. Certainty narrows us. So the road is given. The energy in the acorn is going to arise. Reality is going to manifest in our awareness moment to moment. And that's the basis of our confidence. Everything that can happen on this planet will happen. Schoolgirls in Nigeria will be kidnapped and taken away. Artists in prison will create beautiful things. What do we expect? There is such a thing as cancer. And there are human beings. Therefore, human beings will get cancer. We invented alcohol. We invented automobiles. There are teenagers. Teenagers will drink and drive and die. What do we expect? And I'm not saying this so that we're callous or indifferent or overwhelmed. I'm saying this so that we can move through the shock, the paralyzing shock of moment-to-moment reality arising, the shaking of the rattle, whatever that is. Oh my God, how could this happen? How could this happen to me? How could this happen to someone I love? I'm in shock. I'm appalled. And that means I'm frozen. I can't act. I can't be here. And so what do we expect? Everything that can happen will happen. And as Jan said last night, everything that arises passes away. We can be confident of that. We can study the teachings and we can practice, knowing that it's going to collapse. And that's okay. It has to. As soon as we cling to it, all we're left with is that wiggling tail. The last thing is that this energy that arises moment to moment and manifests in this way is sacred. When we touch into it, the only word that I have for it is love. Because it's overwhelming. It's way too big for the mind to grasp. Everything is energy. Everything is consciousness. Everything is imbued with love. Even greed, hate, and delusion. Everything. In the words of Jennifer Barazon, the light on the hills is full of mercy. The wind in the trees, it comes to save me. The silence, it will never desert me. I long to hold the whole world in these arms. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings everywhere be free.